Hello and welcome back to the channel. So when it comes to Palantir stock, most serious investors, including myself, need at least a 5 to 10 year investment horizon. And this could be really differentiated from, example, a Chevron, where individuals would know that in 10 years, oil will have less relevance, but right now they pay a very high dividend. So it's investing more for what the company offers today. However, when investing in a company based on what it should be in 5 to 10 years from now, especially when it doesn't have sustained profitability like Palantir, you have to, one, truly believe in the management team, and two, you have to truly believe in the mission, because that's the only way you can trust that the management will actually grow on its plans and that the mission itself has enough TAM to create that growth, ultimately reflecting in the financials and reflecting in the stock price. So the other day when I was reading the annual letter given over by Alex Karp, I was again reassured by my investment in Palantir because it ticked off these two boxes. I continue to have total confidence in Alex Karp and how genuine he is in executing the Palantir mission. So in this video, I want to look at a few of the highlights from this annual letter because I believe they give huge insights into Palantir's ideology and their mission going forward. And again, this is extremely important when you're along for a 5 to 10 year ride with this company. Before we get into this video, if you can please like and subscribe to help support the channel. So the first line that I want to look at is that every large organization, every industry and sector in the world is becoming a software company, willingly or otherwise. Alex Karp is 100% right here because it doesn't matter if you're in the retail industry or the automotive sector. At the end of the day, because of the amount of data you're able to extract these days, you will be able to make more efficient production lines or supply chains with all this data. And if you don't do this, you'll just be at a disadvantage to your competitors. So whether your business is not actually software, you still need to become somewhat of a software company, or you can use a third party, but ultimately you still need to think in software terms to not have that disadvantage. If we see he's saying we have built those platforms as well as the hundreds of component products that make them work. And you scroll a little more down and he says, in this century, believe that the only mode is software. So basically, he is reaffirming that Palantir has all of these different products and they were born out of the original Gotham project used for the government. But now, as we see, they're expanding to many different product offerings, to Foundry for crypto, to Apollo, Foundry for builders. I'm sure many more will be coming. And ultimately, the mode is going to be software in this century. That is really what gives you the competitive advantage. And imagine the advantage of a company is going to be how they aggregate and compartmentalize and use their data. And Palantir is at the core of all of this. Now, I want to read these next few paragraphs because I believe they're extremely important to show what Palantir has comparable to the competition. And Alex Karp does discuss this in detail in other interviews, but let's read it and then I'll give my analyzation. So he said, most software companies are either uninterested in producing or unable to produce products that address the fundamental needs of a large institution. The investment required is too high. The potential payoff is too uncertain. As a result, the market builds products that lend themselves to commodification in the present, but such products do little over the long term to address the underlying challenges of the organizations they purport to serve. The problem that we seek to address are not small. The construction of a software platform that consists of hundreds of component parts for the purpose of metabolizing tens of thousands of tables of data, some of which have billions of rows each, presents enormous technical challenges. And the effective adoption and implementation of such a platform at an organization that may have dozens of separate divisions and hundreds of thousands of people present further challenges. The management of data across different countries and legal regimes adds additional complexity. So what he's saying today is that the products that are offered are just not enough for solving the most difficult problems, and that this is ultimately what Palantir is going after at the moment. And this is because a lot of these companies are looking to just commodify their product right now, trying to sign on as much clients as they can get. But really, it's a one size fits all. They bring these clients in. They can obviously compartmentalize their data and do some of that data analyzation, but it's not to the extent that's really needed, especially going forward where there's going to be immense amount of data that can really give companies that advantage to whether it's the supply chain or whatever sense that company needs. And he is saying that this is something that Palantir has, they've been working on, and Palantir is really lucky because he's also saying these companies don't want to take that risk to invest in creating such a product because it's just very uncertain. But Palantir had the ability to work with the US government going back to 2003 in order to really perfect such a product. And that was only able to be done because of the investments they got from the CIA and the time that they had to also do it. But these companies don't have necessarily those resources and time. And now it comes to the extent that Palantir actually has the ability to solve the most difficult problems, because when we're talking about the military and the US government, these are the most crucial decisions in society that Palantir is helping solve through data analytics. So yes, Palantir right now has less clientele than, say, Snowflake, but that's because they're right now only focusing on the hardest problems. But once you solve the hardest problems, it tends to be easier to go downstream to then incorporate the smaller companies and smaller problems. And another point is that he says most of the largest consumer internet companies in Silicon Valley have built software products whose principal value is that they enable the efficient extraction and monetization of our personal information. So this really seems like it's almost a direct answer to all those who are saying that Palantir just tries to take your data and monetize it and sells it to the highest bidder. And this is something that Ross Gerber was saying actually a few months back. And this is a clear answer to that this is not the mission of Palantir. And he goes on and says the construction of a more efficient platform for the distribution of consumer advertising was never our ambition. We have declined to build our business on the back of monetizing data that is not ours and that we do not own. The decision led us to focus on the nature and value of the software itself that we are building rather than what it consumes. So he's saying right here, no, this is not what they're doing. They are not trying to monetize the data. They are actually focusing on the software product that they offer itself. And really, for example, if you're, say, Facebook, you are always looking on how I can better monetize the user's data and how I can use my algorithms to connect them to advertisers, as opposed to necessarily only working on trying to make the product itself better. Alex is saying here that no, we are only focused on making the actual product better and not the monetization of the data that flows through the product. And this means that they're continuously trying to create better value from the product itself to its customers. Now, if we go on to this last part, and this is really where Palantir's ideology comes in, and Alex Karp's, he says, the relationship between this country's governing elite and the military, whose existence is a precondition for the power of the ruling class, is unfortunately complex. An increasing divergence exists between the interests of the American ruling class and those of the public. The governing elite simply does not bear the cost of our nation's defense. We are not ambivalent about the side we have chosen when it comes to supporting the defense of the United States. Everything we have accomplished and everything we have built has been made possible by the country in which our company was founded. So I see these as very strong words from Alex Karp, and I really agree with them. So it seems that there's right now this perception in the U.S. of we hate the military and hate the U.S. government. Alex Karp is saying this is very true when it comes to Silicon Valley and many corporations. But what he's saying is don't forget that these corporations only exist because the military and because the U.S. is this strong and enabled them to exist. So the ones that enabled them to exist, they're going against and actually perceiving in a negative light. And he is saying we are taking the opposite point of view. We are right now living in a country that enables us to exist and enable a lot of freedoms and opportunities that don't exist elsewhere. So this perception is somewhat unfounded. Even if the US has things that they can definitely work on, the way corporations and some individuals are viewing institutions like the CIA and the military are counterproductive to the very survival of these corporations. Moreover, I'd say that we don't live in a vacuum. So if we hate on the US to the extent that we want to tear it apart, we have to remember that there's also China and Russia and other cultures, some of them authoritarian, that will fill this vacuum, and not necessarily do we want that. So tearing apart a lot of what we have that enabled a lot of this to not be the prime focus. And Alex Karp is willing to be political and say that Palantir is on the side of we respect the country we're in, we appreciate the country we're in, and we will stand by them. And I think a lot of this has to do with also the idea that, going back to Ross Gerber, looking at Palantir as the worst company in the world because of what it does. Like, don't you want the US to have the best data analytics in order to have the most efficient institutions and to survive the next century as opposed to our opponents? And this is why I'm 100% with Alex Karp. Although the US has a lot they can work on, I totally believe that we have it better than many countries. I think the flaw is in a lot of individuals that they live and they can't think of themselves versus other countries of how good they have it, and also versus other eras in terms of how good they have it. So instead of trying to tear it all down, I think that we should continue building because we are heading in the right direction, and with innovation, it should get us there even quicker. And the last thing he writes is, we build software to ensure the survival of our most vital institutions, and we succeed only if and when those institutions do. And this goes back to what we were saying. If the narrative becomes that the US is awful and the institutions are awful and we need to tear them down, I don't think we'll be better off. Palantir obviously is only as strong as these institutions are, and Palantir can make these institutions much stronger, which is, I think, is what we should want, because I don't think the vacuum would be filled by better institutions and a better civilization. So when Alex Karp says, and he many times did, that the world rests on Palantir's shoulders, I think he means the West rests on Palantir's shoulders because of how crucial their company is. But obviously, if the West crumbles, then Palantir will as well. This is an incredible letter by Alex Karp. I'm extremely happy that he is the CEO of Palantir. I am happy with the mission of Palantir and obviously the product that they offer. And soon we will get the earnings report, and then we can look more at the financials, and I'll be making a video on the financials to see if they're executing on what they said and obviously their growth going forward. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.